Yeah, the talk I gave 25 years ago, just to date me, I was doing a presentation on the different kinds of translation modes and translation tools. And there was actually a branch on that diagram that said, what do you do if the text that you're translating only exists on paper? And there were tools that were appropriate. So nowadays that wouldn't even occur to us, but that was back in the day. Okay, this talk is going to be on translation quality evaluation and work that's being done in developing a new ASTM standard. And my name is Merle Tenney, or as I'm known to my I18N and L10 in friends, M3ET4Y. So the standard that we're working on is ASTM 46396. It's a WK means that it's in development. When they become final, it gets an F instead of a WK. The title of the standard is Standard Practice for Analytic Evaluation of Translation Quality. And I think you probably understand what most of those words are, but the one that I would focus on is analytic, because that means that basically you measure individual items and you compute things from the bottom up, as opposed to some other kinds of approaches. It's unofficially called MQM 2.0. There was still is an MQM standard, which isn't officially 1.0, but we're calling it 1.0 because it's being superseded. All right, we're going to talk a bit about quality management, a little bit more about the background of MQM and what it's all about. Then we're going to dive in and talk about some of the organizational stuff, error types, severity levels, root causes, quality evaluation stages, a scoring model that is relatively new, and how you all tie into all that. There is an MQM 1.0 out there. People are using it, and you'll see a couple of examples of it that are in use. Originally, I was just going to do what's new in MQM 2.0, but whenever we've done this, there's people who don't know what MQM 1.0 has, and there's some things you need to understand about that. So I'll say a little bit about both, and I'll try to identify the stuff that's new when that comes up. So let's do that. ISO and Six Sigma and some others have a number of quality management terms, and here's a list of terms that comes from ISO. You've probably seen all these terms. You'll notice that the next to last one is italicized. And the reason for that is that that's not an ISO term. It's a valid concept. And the concept is analyzing, see how well something works after it's done. And there actually isn't an ISO term for that. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. So those are the terms. I just want to say a bit more about the three in the middle: quality assurance, quality control, and quality evaluation. They're probably, most of the people in this room and most of the people you know use quality assurance in a way that ISO doesn't. You've heard things like software quality assurance and linguistic quality assurance. And when people use that term, they're basically looking at how well something was translated or how well some software works, that kind of thing, after the fact. That's not what ISO means. Quality assurance is all the things that you do when you're developing a product that give you reason to believe that you'll do a good job with that. It's stuff that's done up front. So if you're doing translation, hiring good translators, having a good translation memory, having a good term base, these are the things that would go into quality assurance. But most of us use it in the sense of checking how good something is after it's delivered. Not ISO consistent. So there's going to be, I'm going to use these terms the ISO way. And I suggest you try to adopt that as well, but that's a tall order, I know that. Quality control is the things that you do when you're producing something to make sure that you're on track. So you're self-testing, you're all the kinds of things that you would do. And quality evaluation is what you do when it's done, or somebody does. It's usually not the person who produced the product. It's something that somebody does after the product is finished that gives you reason to believe that you go back and see how good they did. And it's what most people call quality assurance. We'll be consistently calling it quality evaluation. In fact, the term that most people use for this kind of field in our industry is LQA, linguistic quality assurance. In all of my slides and in our discussions in the group, we use TQE, translation quality evaluation. So, so if I say TQE, that's what I'm talking about. Any good metric, it needs to have two things: validity and reliability. Basically, I'm not going to read the slides here, but basically validity means that what you're measuring is actually reflective of what you intend to measure. So here's the example here that if you're measuring words per hour, that's not a good way to measure quality. That's a good way to measure efficiency, but not quality. So you need, and people do get off track with this kind of thing. Let's go on to, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but reliability means that the way you're measuring things actually has some consistency. That if you do it 2 or 3 times, you'll get the same results. If 2 different people who are equally qualified do it, they'll get similar results. And there's another way, inter-method reliability, that if you measure something in 2 different ways, you would expect to get comparable results. And we'll actually give an example of this later on in the talk. So that's an important element of reliability as it pertains to MQM. All right. People who check the quality of things are very often the people who fix things. And so quality evaluation and error correction are 2 different things. And to skip down to the bottom bullet, it's not a good idea to try to do them at the same time, try to measure something and fix it at the same time. You may notice something in the context of measuring something that you see that needs to be fixed, and maybe make a note and get back to it later. But you should not be given the responsibility of measuring something and fixing it simultaneously. That's really going to be counterproductive. So what are the modes that people use error correction? One of them is they don't do it at all. If you're given the responsibility of going back and seeing how good the manuals were that your company produced 2 years ago, you'll look at a manual and you'll evaluate it, but nobody's going to update that manual. So there's no error correction whatsoever. Sometimes one LSP will proof the work of somebody else, and they may or may not give the feedback to the ones who did it. If they're not supposed to give the feedback anonymous, then there'd be no error correction there. The most common relationship between error correction and quality evaluation is that you do everything related to translation, including fixing as many errors as you can find before you evaluate it. You ask yourself the question, what would you be doing if there were no quality evaluation? Well, you'd make it as good as you could, then you'd release it, right? So usually the quality evaluation is inserted right between do it as good as you can and releasing it. So that's a very common sequence. The other thing that happens, though, is when you do the quality evaluation, you will invariably find some things that you want to fix. So the other way of doing that is, okay, you finish the quality evaluation and you go back and fix some of the things that you saw. So in particular, we'll look at critical errors. Those are things that by definition need to be fixed before it's released. So that would obviously be a pass to go back. And sometimes the tools that you're using to do the quality evaluation will make it easy to do that, and sometimes they won't help you at all. Okay, so I don't know what notion you have of quality evaluation, but let me tell you a couple of things that it is, or analytic quality evaluation. Tell you what it is not. First of all, it's not an automated tool by any stretch of the imagination. So I've listed a couple of things there for writing error checkers and translation error checkers. So think of your grammar checkers, Acrolinx and Grammarly, Microsoft Word Grammar Checker. Think of your translation quality assurance tools like Xbench, Checkmate, Distiller, and so forth. These they work automatically, and either, well, when I say they're semi-auto, they're automated. They show you a problem and say, hey, do you want to fix this? And they say, yeah. They go on to the next one. So they're offering up suggestions, but it's really, they're kind of managing an error correction mode. This is not a quality evaluation. Nobody's computing a score. So that's not what we are. There's some automatic tools, especially in the field of machine translation. Everybody's familiar with Blue and Meteor and so forth. We're not anything remotely like that. MQM can be used, and I think should be used, in evaluating the quality of machine translation, as well as post-edit machine translation, as well as professional translation, as well as community translation. Every modality of translation is amenable to quality evaluation, and you'd like to be able to compare things on the same criteria, and that's what we attempt to do. I will say this. Where does something like Blue make sense, and where doesn't it make sense? If you're talking about a production translation environment, it makes zero sense. It makes no sense to use something like Blue or NIST or Meteor at all, because the whole premise of something like Blue is somebody has produced a translation. Let's go compare it to this gold standard translation and see how close it is. Well, if you've already got a gold standard translation, why are you translating it again? Just use the gold standard translation. That model works when you're doing iterative improvements to a machine translation system. It has almost no usefulness unless you're testing a machine translation system. It has no usefulness in a production translation environment. There's a holistic approach, which is let's let's look at the translation as a whole and let's measure it in a couple of ways. There's a companion standard, which I'll tell you about in just a second, and the tool that is used there is called HQuest. It's Holistic Quality Evaluation Standard for Translation. And it's, you read the whole translation, have an expert read it, ask a couple of questions on a couple of dimensions, and assign a score to each of those, and you end up with a couple of scores. And that, we'll come back to this. There's an interesting tie-in between this approach and ours, but it's top-down, analytic is bottom-up. All right, so what is the tie-in? First step is that it's good to compare the two so that you can see where each one has some advantages over the other, maybe each one. If you had an HQuest and an MQM, I probably should start with that. And you're saying, well, which one's better? Well, they're both good for different things, right? But doing both approaches allows you to learn some things about each of those tools and maybe improve them in a way that you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't have that other tool. Now, the HQuest, oh, by the way, that's ASTM WK54884, also in development. Serge Gladkov, who was involved in the MQM 1.0 development, is leading the charge on ASTM WK54884. It does a high-level measure for readability and fidelity, and he also does in his approach, and oh, by the way, make a note of any showstoppers. As you're reading through, make a note on the side of anything, what we would call a critical error, so that can be fixed at the same time. But at the end of the day, really it's about coming up with a readability score and a fidelity score on a 10-point scale. And it's like ours. It's not a metric, but it's a framework for creating metrics. I didn't say that about MQM. It's not a metric. It's a framework for creating metrics. It shows you some ways that you can go about it, some parameters that you can set. And if you instantiate those parameters, then you come up with a metric. But ours is just an approach to do that. The holistic approach does not use error typologies or severity levels, which we do in MQM. And as I said, it is complementary to our standard, and vice versa. This is a diagram of how they might work together. So if you look in the bottom or top right, top left, I'll get there, corner, you have a translated document, right, or some translated text. How would you use holistic, and how could you use holistic and analytic together? One way would be to start with the holistic. Have a look at it, and you might come to three conclusions. One, this is clearly good, just let it go, publish it. And that's the top branch. The next possibility is, well, it might be good enough, might not, we better check it some more, in which case you're going to go to the analytic. And then the third option is, this is just so bad, let's not waste any more time, let's send it back and have them improve the translation and give it back to us. In that middle branch, then you do the analytic evaluation and things either pass or fail at that point. So it's kind of a front end in a way to the analytic. Okay, a little bit about where we all came from. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with some, maybe not all of these previous attempts at doing analytic quality evaluation. The first was probably Lisa QA back in the days when Lisa was still with us. And that was back in the last millennium. Started in 1995 and they did their last release in 2011. After that, Arl Lomel, who's on our group, and Hans Uskreut and a couple other people at DFKI, that's the German Center for Artificial Intelligence, got together and said, you know, we need to do something else. We need to do an analytic approach. It was largely a reaction to things like Blue, but we need to do another way of analyzing the quality of translations. So they started working on that problem. And I don't think they called it MQM at the time. By the way, multidimensional quality metrics, what is that? Let's break that down just a little bit. I'll show you dimensions in just a moment. The dimensions are basically high-level error types. So they're, you know, like you saw the readability and fluency and so forth, but they're things like that, design, locale conventions. They're high-level, they're rubrics for a whole bunch of different related errors. That's the multidimensional quality, you know what that is. And the metrics are different ways of a system of developing metrics that you can use to analyze the quality using multiple dimensions. All right. Their original work was funded by the European community under a project called QT Launchpad. And so I will show you on a slide in just a minute about how they went about doing that, but they put together a list. Back in the Lisa days, by the way, there was no taxonomy of errors. It was just a long list of errors. And they said, gee, these things can be grouped, and there's some advantages to grouping, which maybe we can talk about just a little bit, but they can be grouped in a logical way. So they did a taxonomy. Then independently, TAUS, I skipped over ITS 2.0. ITS is internationalization tag set. They interacted with the people who were doing MQM and said, hey, we're coming up with this system for tagging different things in the context of translation. Do you want us to put in our tags for the kinds of errors that you flag in this approach? And they said, sure. And then they came up, let's standardize on the IDs for different errors and so forth. So that was done early on. But the problem is that branch has not kept up. The tags that you find in ITS 2.0 are a small subset of the total set of tags that we're using today. So in the meantime, TAUS was working on a similar kind of a problem. They were looking at it from the point of view of all the customers who use TAUS, and lots of people, not just us, are doing analytic kinds of things. If you're an LSP, you probably have several customers who have their own homegrown system for measuring the quality of translation, something very similar to what we're doing with MQM. But they have their own system, and they set of errors, how they define the errors, how they tally the points, and all that kind of stuff. So they were seeing this, and they said, we need to standardize this so that we can develop best practices and so forth. So they started working on their own typology. And at some point, people in the European Commission said, wait a minute, we have this MQM thing coming out of DFKI, and we have this thing called DQF, Dynamic Quality Framework, coming out of TAUS, and they're different standards. And we're supposed to adopt both of them. You guys are kind of missing the point of this. So they insisted that the two be coordinated. So the TAUS people and the DFKI people, and also Alan Melby, who was with his own organization, LTEC, got together and said, okay, let's come up with a standard typology of errors, and they did. And it's pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's really pretty darn good, and it stood up over the years. I'm not going to show that to you because it's much too long, but that is the basis for the error identification today. Those two things were harmonized, and there was a European Commission project to do just that, QT 21, and that was done in 2015. In 2016, there was a decision made that this work, which had been done kind of, I won't say informally, but unofficially, DFKI and TAUS would benefit from going through a standardization process. And ASTM International was chosen as the organization. If you're not familiar with ASTM International, it's been doing standards for 120 years. It's actually older than ISO. They have lots of fields that started out in industrial kinds of things, testing and materials and so forth. But they have all kinds of intellectual areas and things now, including a healthy area in language technology. So we're in that group there, working under their auspices as MQM 46396. And we've been working on that since 2016. It was in 2019. I'll anticipate the question, when will we be done? And I don't have an answer to that, but I would say it's not weeks and it's not years, it's probably months before we finish this. So I hope I'm not wrong, but we're nearing the end. This is an interesting thing. This is Arl just sent this to me a couple of days ago. He dug this out of his archives. This was actually from an exercise they were doing on that very first, remember when I said they were doing the QT Launchpad, and they were going out and trying to come up with a first error typology before they merged with DQF? This is the exercise they went through. On the left-hand side, you'll see a list of error types: terminology glossary, omission, punctuation, consistency, grammar and syntax, spelling, mistranslation, and so forth, right? And on all the columns, you have various kinds of standards and tools that were out there at the time. The Lisa QA model had 3 versions of it: UI, docs, and full docs. The SAE, some of you know SAE J2450. What you may not realize is that there were only 6 error types in SAE J2450. ISO had something which I don't even know what it is, 14080. Then there were some tools from SDL, AppSec, Checkmate, and so forth that had their own set of errors that they checked for. These were automated tools, but they did have a set of errors that they could recognize with, more or less. And so just agreeing on what the errors of interest were was what this job was all about. And you can see there was total count. The terminology got the most with 9 tools having that, and omission, something was omitted in translation, got 8, and so forth. So this is the kind of effort they went through. So the DFKI thing was focused on more or less industry standards, and the TAUS effort was focused more on customers who were doing translations. And so that was actually interesting to come from 2 different perspectives when they came together. So this just gives you an example again of what is documented with a particular error type. And right now today we have in MQM 182 error types. Nobody's going to use that. We'll talk about that in a second. 182 error types. This is just one of them. This is the mistranslation error type. Its ID is mistranslation, all lowercase with hyphens. That's it never changes. It's just whatever it is in English, and that's the way that you unify that with ITS 2.0, for example. You pass IDs back and forth, not names and things. It has a definition. The target content does not accurately represent the source content. It was a bad translation. It has a parent in this taxonomy. It has a parent error type, which was accuracy. And it has some children error types, which are ambiguous, translation, date time. These are all names, and they have definitions and so forth with them. Entity, false friend, and so forth. A bunch of children. And there's some examples of it, or at least one example of its use. And here's the example. A source text states that a medicine should not be administered in doses greater than 200 milligrams, but the translation states that it should be administered in doses greater than 200 milligrams. That's a problem, right? So the negation has been dropped out. That's an omission problem in the translation. So this tells you a lot about what the mistranslation error is all about. And we have that same level of documentation for all 182 errors. And I will point, what's not on this slide, there are a couple of things that are on this slide. One of them is that there's a thing called display name, which you can define in your own implementation, and it's different from, we call it mistranslation here, but you might call it bad translation or incorrect translation, and maybe that's what you use in your organization, because you've been using that term, bad translation, for 20 years, and nobody wants to call it mistranslation. Okay, your display name for this error is bad translation. What happens if you want to use this methodology in France or Japan or Azerbaijan, right? Then you're going to need to translate this, right? The interface and everything's going to have to be in another language. So you need to be able to use different labels that people interact with. That's the display name. It's not here because there's no standard display name other than this translation. All right. And there is one other thing. I don't have a slide for this, but there is an extension mechanism. So if you have an error type that is not there, for you it's really, really important, and you don't believe it's there, you can come up with an ID. All those IDs start with X hyphen, and you give it a name, and then you plug it into the tree, you say where it fits in, you provide this information, a definition, and so forth. Now you can use it, just like you'd use any other error type. Error type subsets. We have 182 available to us in total. Who would ever use 182? And the answer is probably nobody. If you're doing some kind of an academic thing where you wanted to splice and dice every single kind of error possible, you could use all 182, and I'll bet you would never even encounter half of them, right? You could do that. What is more likely to be, there's a couple of reasons that other than exhaustively using all 182 why this might be good. One of them is that maybe you don't go all the way down. Maybe you only get down 1 or 2 levels from the top of the tree, and having some things underneath it with definitions and examples gives you a flavor for what that particular node is, which is going to be your terminal node in your analysis, so that it helps you understand more what's going on there. And the other reason is related to that. If you have, let's just say, just for the sake of argument, that you went down 3 levels, or let's go say you go down 2 levels in the tree, and you flag every error you find at the level of granularity that you would need to have an exhaustive coverage of the second level from the top. Great. But you don't want to do that. That's way too many. So maybe you don't do that. Maybe you just go down 1 level, and you can identify a particular error as being an example of this second level or that second level. So what do you do with it? You roll it up. Whatever the nearest ancestor is what that error is going to be labeled as. So it's still accounted for. And it tells you what kinds of things should now go under this aggregate error type. All right. I said if you lop off the internationalization branch, and I'm going to tell you why you'd want to do that. You lop off 50 categories and you get it down to 132. We'll talk about internationalization in a second. Don't get me wrong. I think internationalization problems are very real. I've spent half my career doing internationalization things, so we're not dismissing the importance of internationalization. But in this error typology, between the MQM 1.0 and 2.0, we came up with a different way of looking at it, and as a result, that's kind of obsolete. It's not officially obsolete right now. It's officially sidelined. If you're implementing this tomorrow, you probably don't want to use it, and I can explain why in a minute. There's a subset that Taos uses. It's called the DQF MQM subset. It's got about 42 plus or minus error types in it, and so you'll show you their tool in just a minute, and you'll see that they pre-populate their error annotation tool. Well, they don't really pre-populate, but they give you access to all 42, and you can turn on and off the ones that you want, limited to that set of 42. A lot of their customers use that, and they came together with their users to decide what those errors would be. In your own particular organization, you can standardize on your own set. It can be different from DQF, it can be more, it can be less, it can be both. And you can even, if you want to, standardize on different sets, maybe for different target languages, or for different divisions, or for different text types. These are all different metrics, of course, but there may be a good reason why you want to do your Marcom stuff a little bit different from your user interface stuff. So this is an option that's available to you. And setting aside whatever your standard set of error types is, when you go to do an annotation and a quality evaluation, you can turn on and off different things. So the active set in any particular evaluation could be different from whatever the set is that you normally use. Haven't said anything about writing, and that makes me sad because I think that writing evaluation is very important, and I think that writing is very closely related to translation. But as it turns out, if you look at our 8 high-level dimensions, 1.5 of them have to do with translation per se, or bilingual by nature. There's the very first one is accuracy, which is the accuracy of the translation. That's bilingual. And then we've put in our terminology dimension, we have some things that are bilingual terminology issues and some things that are monolingual, target language terminology issues. So there's a little bilingual, a little monolingual. I don't know if it's exactly 1.5, but let's just say 1.5 of the error dimensions are bilingual, and the other 6.5 are monolingual. Well, what's to keep you from using this methodology in evaluating the quality of a document, whether it's been translated or not? And the answer is nothing. You can do that. And we have made attempts here and there to accommodate that. But we don't advertise it as such because we really have been focusing on translation. And at some point, I think we would like to get involved with people who really focus on editing in a single language and make sure that that is good enough for their use. And maybe in some future MQM will do that. But it's there, but it's not really pushed today. And you can do that on the source text or the target text, right? So I won't even say stay tuned. It's too early to say that. We're not doing anything with writing evaluation right now, but that would be a nice thing to have. Okay, so the second thing that we mark on an error, so the first thing is the error type, right? The second thing that we mark is the severity level. How serious is this particular error? And we mark 4 levels here. And the first one really isn't a severity level, but it kind of is in a way. That's the neutral. So this is something when the evaluators goes through and they mark something as being neutral, that means that they're not going to ding you for it. You didn't get it wrong, but they would have preferred maybe another term, or they want to call your attention to something that, you kind of have a linguistic tick. You always do it one way when you should have done it another way, but it's not wrong, okay? So that would be a neutral error, and you'll see in a minute that when we start tallying points, everything that's a neutral gets multiplied by 0. So it's not going to contribute to the penalty values that you accumulate. Now, so why even have it there? And the answer is that it's not always 0. There are some implementations where people will give a small amount, 0.5 points or something to every neutral error. That's an option that's available to you. But for all intents and purposes, our first penalty value for neutral is 0. Then you have minor, major, and critical. Minor are errors that don't seriously impact the usefulness of the document. People see that it's a problem, but they can make sense of it and still move along. Major errors really are stumbling blocks. The document as a whole is still usable, but it's really got some problems, and people are going to struggle with it. They would not want to release that as quality published work. And then the critical errors goes beyond that. It's, no, this has to be fixed. It's so bad it cannot go out. That not the doses should be over 200 milligrams. That's a critical error, right? So that can't go out. And just by definition, if it's critical, it's got to be fixed before it's released. So anything that's flagged as critical requires somebody to address that. Okay, here's a new thing. This was introduced, or is being introduced, in MQM 2.0, root causes. I like root causes, and I think you will too. It is kind of the third component of errors. The first two are the error type and the severity level, and now you have root cause. The definition of root cause is an initial object or action in a causal chain that leads to and is responsible for an error in an evaluation text. So something, you know, it's the devil made me do it, the root cause made me do it, right? So an example, an easy, obvious example. If you're translating and you use translation memory, and you don't even see some of the sentences that are translated, and something from translation memory goes into the translation, and there's a mistake in that translation memory, it's a mistake in your translation, but you had nothing to do with it. The bad translation memory was the root cause. Furthermore, well, as it is today, if you go and look at the 182 categories we have right now, bad translation memory is one of them. And there's some of the things in the existing set of error types need to go away, because in the new formulation, they're going to be root causes, not error types. So that's a cause of errors. It's not an error. And to give you a little bit further example of that, in a single, today, if you have a bad sentence and it's got something came out of the translation memory that was bad, that's one error. But what if it had 4 errors in it? One of them was minor, 2 of them were major, and one of them was critical, whatever. And they're different error types. You're still counting one error of a bad translation memory. So this gives you a chance to flag all 4, the appropriate error type, appropriate severity level, and the root cause for all 4 is bad translation memory. So that's the idea there. And one of the reasons, there's 2 reasons to do this. One of them is because you really want to focus on what's going on. I haven't said this before, so I'll say it now. One of the things that is good about an analytic quality assessment methodology is that it is actionable. You use BLUE, or you even use a holistic management, a quality management tool, quality assessment tool. You can say overall it's pretty good, overall it's pretty bad. Where is it bad? I don't know. Here we say, oh, it's bad here. We have severe, we got critical error here and a bunch of severe major errors over here, and we have this root cause and that root cause, and we can tell you, at least on 2 dimensions, or 3 even actually, what is wrong and where it is wrong, and you can go into it and fix it. You can look at patterns below the upper level. You can look at whole dimensions. How good is terminology as a group, as opposed to linguistic well-formedness as a group, right? So you can have those kinds of conversations. So that I think is critical. You flag the root causes in the error annotation, which we're going to get to in a second, and then you filter on them in error compilation. I'm getting ahead because I haven't told you about error annotation and error compilation. That's coming up real soon. Oh, here it is. Quality evaluation stages. In 1.0 of MQM, we just talked about quality evaluation. In 2.0, we say, no, well, hang on. The quality evaluation isn't just some notion. It's not just a definition, but it's a series of things that you do. And we can talk in much more detail about those specific steps. And there are 4 steps here. Error annotation. I'll tell you more about these. That's where you go through a document, segment by segment, find the errors and flag them. Error compilation. Now, that's the only manual step, by the way. All the others are automatic. Error compilation, you set some parameters, and it munges that data and comes up with an array of error counts for different severity levels and different error types. Quality analysis, you actually put it through its paces, and I'll say a bit more about that. And you come up with a quality score. You actually measure it. And then the quality review is you use the scores that you got out of the quality analysis for some custom purpose. And I'll just say that much right now because I'll say a bit more in a minute. Before and after that, there's actually things that you do, so I put them as prologue and epilogue. Before you get started, you're going to go through the exercise of deciding what is going to get a quality analysis and what is not. If you have a document, are you going to do the whole thing? Are you going to do a sample out of it? Do you have a rule that every 5th document gets done all the time, or 20% of every document goes to quality analysis? you have to have some methodology for deciding what gets analyzed. It's probably not reasonable to analyze every single thing you translate, so you need to think about that. And we're not providing any guidance on that. So, and then the final thing is, when you've done it, you really should have some kind of a system for archiving this. You'll see there's some of the reasons why, but you really need the ability to go back and compare what you're doing now with what you've done in the past. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. But that's really going to be important in managing your quality over time and over languages and service providers and all kinds of dimensions that are really important to you. Okay, error annotation. It's a manual process. I'm going to show you a couple examples. The first thing you do is you set it up and you say, okay, you choose your error types and so forth. When you're going through, typically you go through a segment at a time. You read the segment and read the translation. And you say, oh, okay, this is a problem. And you take that word, flag it, and then you attach an error type to it with severity level. And if it's appropriate, you attach a root cause. Usually that is done, that can be done in 2 or 3 ways. One of them is inside the tool itself. You don't ever see it. But it can be exported in an inline method like ITS 2.0. Those are XML tags, right? So you have a starting tag and a finish tag. And in the middle of the starting tag, you say what kind of error it is and the severity level. And so you just put these tags around the errors, right? That's inline markup. Standoff markup works a little bit differently. You leave the text you're analyzing untouched. You have this other data structure where you list all the errors and you have pointers into that, right? And that requires that you don't change that. But a lot of times on these things that we're doing here, that's not an unfair assumption. I like standoff a lot, but we don't have any rules for how that should be structured, just saying that that's an option. And then you take those errors and you output an error list. And we'll see a couple of examples of that. So here's the examples. And these are examples that are based on MQM 1.0 because nobody's doing 2.0 yet. It doesn't really exist. So the 2 examples come from DQF, which is produced by Taos. And the other example is from Content Quote. And they've taken a fundamentally different approach. With DQF, they say, let's take whatever translation tool you're using and let's plug it into there. So for example, SDL Trados Studio is going to be a home environment for the error annotation that you do with DQF. And you run through it and you tag as you go. And when you're all done, then you upload it to the cloud where DQF maintains a dashboard and they maintain statistics for you and do various kinds of things for you. So all the rest of that analysis, all the automatic stuff happens on the cloud. So that's their approach. And this is an example. I got 2 or 3 slides of DQF, how they work. This is the first one is a screen where you're filling out the parameters, choosing your error types, and you're also choosing, on the right-hand side, you're choosing the error severities. And even though I haven't talked about severity levels, it comes up in the quality analysis stage, and you're setting the values you're going to use for the error severity levels as well. So you're basically doing all your parameter setup at the very beginning of the whole process, and some of those parameters kick in later on. Error annotation. You can see the top half, you can see that they're going through a segment at a time. Somebody's found an error, they've highlighted it, and then you go over and look in the bottom left and you see this list of errors. You choose the error that it applies to, and then you also choose the severity level, and you've just now flagged an error with this error type and that severity level. And in the future, and a particular root cause as well if it applies. But today it's just those 2. Then you can, when you're done, you can look at a list of all the errors that you found. And it's a very succinct representation. This is an example of what I called an error list. And in a minute, we'll talk about what an error summary looks like. It's a little different kind of an animal. But it's a long list of all the errors that were found and all the ways that you identify those errors. Let's go over to Content Quote. Now, so the Content Quote approach is different. They say, well, let's not plug into Trados Studio or anything of the sort. Let's make our own tool. And we won't call it a translation error. We'll call it a quality editor. It's a tool that's just designed specifically for measuring the quality of writing or translation, right? Let's focus on the translation. So you measure the quality of translation in their tool. All right. So content, there's one more slide on the DQF. This is their dashboard. This shows you a comparison between how the Dutch did on a particular job and the German. Some bar charts there. I'm sure there are other displays, but I don't have those. So this is all I have right now. Okay, going into Content Quote. They do error annotation as well. They do setup as well. They don't have a slide for that. Error annotation, you can see they're the 2 columns, right? The source and the target. And somebody's found a problem in the target. That's where you look for your problems, in the target. They've highlighted it, and then they go over in that little pop-up window and say, okay, What kind of a problem is that it's a style, and then under style it's a company style. So they've gone down 2 levels in the error typology. It's a company style issue. They flagged it as minor. And notice one thing they do here that's kind of nice. They have before neutral, they have kudos. So if a translator does something really well, you can flag that, give them props for doing a good job. It doesn't factor into the quality evaluation, but it's nice if you're a translator to see somebody recognize something that you've done. Down at the bottom there, you see something that's kind of interesting. A little note field. Another verb would be better. You can send little notes back and forth. And you can see here, this is actually a dialogue, or it can be a dialogue between the translator and the evaluator. And if you're trying to wrestle on whether this is an error or not, there's a third person that can get involved, and that's an arbitrator who says, I agree with the translator, or I agree with the evaluator. So anyway, this is the beginning of a dialogue. They flag it, and they have all those things available to them. Collaboration. This is a little bit more about that. This is the kind of you can go through one at a time, and you can have a little discussion with notes going back and forth. You can see the source and the target. It's not every segment. It's just the ones that had an error flagged. So you can pull them out in a different view. Here's an error list. This is the content quo version of the error list. So it shows not just the error, but the context, the source and the target sentence. The things that are flagged, this is true of the DQF as well. We'll call those error strings. It's the anchor text for the error. It comes into play. So that's part of the documentation for an error is what string was involved. And it maybe even the location. This segment starting on the 15th character or something like that. All right, so that's an error list, summary kind of a thing. When you've done an evaluation, you get this screen here, and you look at that. If you look around, you'll see, for example, that this document had 1,500 words in it. Oh no, is that one or? I think that's 1,500 with a space for the thousands. Anyway, 500 or 1,500 doesn't matter. You get the number of words that were in this segment, or not this segment, but in this evaluation text. Who translated it, the languages involved, and the score that you got, and whether that's pass or fail, right? So you kind of quick view of how did it do. You can take that view and shrink it down and show across a whole bunch of languages for the same document translated in a dozen languages, how they all did, which ones were perfect, which ones were less than perfect, which ones passed, which ones failed. That's really useful too, especially if it failed. You really want to know that. And this is a similar kind of a thing, but it's broken down by translator or by vendor, and you just show all the jobs that they've done recently, and then how those came through as pass or fail, and what scores they got, and that's also good for managers. There's some project management things I haven't shown you that you can do in Content Quo, but just assume that you can manage your projects as well and set up people to work with. Okay, so those are 2 examples. I hope that gives you a flavor of what error annotation is all about. It's you doing it. Somebody going through and looking for errors, flagging them, and then they get tallied for the other steps. The second step or stage is error compilation. If you skip down to that third little bullet, sub-bullet there, the main thing that error compilation does, and what error compilation does today in MQM 1.0, is it takes a one-dimensional list of errors and turns it into a 2-dimensional list of error counts, where each cell in this 2-dimensional represents a particular error type and a particular severity level. So you know how many of this error type had this severity level, this severity level, this severity level. And you can see where that's going to come in handy. We're introducing 2 new things in MQM 2.0. One of them is root cause filtering. I'll have a little bit more to say about this. So this is a way, so isn't it nice that you can flag the root causes of particular errors? So what are you going to do with it? This is what you're going to do with it. You're going to go through and you're going to say, so I'm the quality manager, and I say, I really appreciate that it's not your fault as a translator because you didn't have the term base was wrong or the translation was wrong. Okay, I get it. I'm not going to ding you for something that's not your fault. But I still want to know how bad it was. I still want to know how good or bad. I want to see every single error. I want to see how good or bad it is. Then I want to see 2 breakdowns. I want to see all the errors that can be attributed to the translator and all the errors that can't be attributed to the translator. If there's just a few of them the translator got, I'm going to pat you on the head and say, good job. If there's a lot of them, we'll have a more interesting conversation. If there's a lot of errors in other areas, root causes in other areas, I know where to go If, for example, you say, we've been asking for a style guide to govern us in our work for years, and we still don't have one, and look at all these errors that came out because we didn't have a style guide, I finally get the point that a good 20% of our errors are occurring because we have not done a good job of documenting what our house style is. I get it now. So if you say just all the errors that were not the translator's fault, then that's an interesting, I'd want to see all three of those, right? And you might break it down too. So what you would look at. Duplicate error conflation, I'll have a word to say about this, but I'll show you the slide. We'll come to that in a second. Root cause filtering. You can imagine root cause filtering. This is probably a good time for me to use my magical abilities and break away and go to, wait a minute, let me go no, where is it? Did I not do that? Oh, error typology. Well, I don't see the document that I wanted to look at, so I guess I'm not going to show it to you. But, okay, don't worry about it then.
2 Word documents.
What's that?
You had 2 Word documents. I only see one.
You want to look again? Let's have a look. Okay, so that's not it. That's not it. That's a Word document, but it's not the right one.
That's the Adobe. No.
Yeah, I know. There's a third one that should have been here. I guess I didn't make it.
Try the folder. Next, do 2 more, and try the folder right there.
Okay, and you know what? It didn't make it on. Okay, never mind. So imagine, if you will, so I'll tell you what it is. The root causes are organized like the error types. It's a typology, right? So at the top level, you have one class of root causes, and that could be problems in the source. The source was so bad, nobody could do a good job with the translation. They could be problems in the term base because we had missing resources or bad resources or whatever. Problems in the translation memory and so on. There are several high-level things, and if you drill down on it, let's take problems in the term base. At the next level, you say missing term base. We didn't even have a term base. What do you expect? Okay, we had a term base, but it had wrong terms in it. Or, and so forth. Or we had a term base and had the term but had a bad translation. Those are all different root causes, right? So you can imagine going through that. Since it's a taxonomy, you can talk about wrong term in term base as a very granular error and problems with the term base as a less granular error, right? And the first one is going to be a child of the first one. So you can, when you're designating what root causes you want to include in your analysis and exclude in your analysis, you can go down to any one of those levels. And if you just say root causes having to do with the term base, you'll pick up all of those other root causes that are the subtypes of that. I'm sorry, I wish I could have shown this to you. That was an oversight on my part. So that's the idea there. Now, that's idea number one. Second point is that if you can imagine the filtering operating in 3 gates. If something has to go through all 3 gates to be for an error that has that root cause to be included in the final analysis. So the first gate is default. Every root cause is going to be included. If you specify nothing, then you filter nothing, and everything shows up in the analysis. That's step number 1. Step number 2, you can designate this is an inclusion gate. If you don't put anything there, you're still getting everything, right? If you put something there, and this is the one little twist, if you put something in the inclusion gate, only the things that you list in the inclusion gate are going to go through. It just seemed to be easier to set up that way. So that's what that means. And then on the third one is the exclusion. Regardless of what you've got to this point, everything or just a certain set of root causes, anything you knock out in the exclusion gate gets knocked out. So you put those, the default, the inclusion, and exclusion, and you end up with a set of root causes that is used as kind of a mask to let some of the errors with these different root causes through and to keep others out of the further analysis. So you're going to be reducing, you potentially are being reducing the number of errors that you're reporting on, and you obviously need to keep track of what filters you're using when you do a particular analysis, but that's the way that works. All right, enough about that. Duplicate error conflation. We've had people request this And I think it's a good request. They say, well, you know, we're just trying to see how good or bad it is. What if somebody consistently spells the word honor O-U-R instead of O-R? And they do it 20 times in the document. Did they make 20 mistakes or did they make one, right? And they just happened to be 20 times. If you're of the opinion that they really only made one mistake, but they made that same mistake 20 times, then duplicate error conflation is for you. Because what it does is it takes a subset of all the error types, so it's things like spelling and term choice, things like that, and gives you the capability of counting that as one error instead of however many times it occurred. So so you either get all of them or you get one of them, and there may be a way that we can get some number in between, but for now it's all of them are one. By default, this is turned off, so you get all of them. If you want it on, you turn it on. All right, that's the end of the error compilation stage. Now we get into the quality analysis stage, which is where a lot of the work has been done in MQM 2.0. It implements something we're calling the MQM scoring model, and I'll show that to you in a second. It's based on, the inputs to that come from the error annotation and the error compilation, whatever makes it through after you the root cause filtering and the duplicate error conflation. So whatever makes it through those filters goes into this, and that would be whatever's in the a two-dimensional array of error counts, not words, not error, but number of errors that this particular combination. And the other thing is the number of words that were in the analysis, right? You have to norm everything. You know, if you had a big job, you expect to have more errors. If you have a small job, you expect to have fewer. And at some point, you can guess that we're going to be dividing by that evaluation word count. So that's important. When you're setting it up, you put in some parameters. There's going to be 5 parameters I'm going to show you that contribute to the MQM scoring model. 2 of them we're calling determinative parameters, and 3 of them we're calling scaling parameters. The determinative ones actually give the right kinds of relative weights to different error types and different severity levels. So they're really munging with the data. The scaling things are all about getting different kinds of numbers and different kinds of ranges. So they're scaling parameters. And then at the end of all that, you're going to come out with 2 quality measures, and I'll show you those. So let's get into it. The quality analysis parameters, so the 2 determinative are the severity level penalty. And this is a number that's going to be multiplied by each one of these severity levels that comes up. So 0 for neutral, 1, 5, and 25 for the minor, major, and critical. You can use your own numbers if you don't like those, but that's what they are by default. The error type weight we're really not using right now, but the idea there is if there was a particular area that you were very sensitive to, you could amp up the weight of that error type a little bit, or one that you didn't care about, you could turn it down a little bit. But right now it's 1 for everybody, so that's really a non-issue. Scaling parameters, reference word count, maximum score value, penalty scaler. The reference word count is that when we deliver one of the, you'll see the 2 quality measures. One of those has to do with some standard way of referring to how many errors you're seeing relative to other translation jobs that you're doing. And we're taking 1,000 as our reference word count. The maximum score value is one of the quality measures. It is along a scale of 0 to 100 or something. That's what the 100 is there. And there's a thing there called the penalty scaler, which probably doesn't register with you. And I'll show you in a minute what that's used for. It actually contributes in the calculation of both of those quality measures. I'm using the word quality measure to refer to the 2 different kinds of measures. There's a quality score and a norm penalty total, and to keep that distinct from quality score, which is one of those. All right, so how do they go? The 2 measures are the overall normed penalty total, and this is done by you take all of the errors, and I'll describe it and then I'll show it. You add up all the penalties you get from all the error types of the different severity levels, and then you take that and you divide it, you norm it, you divide it by the number of words in the document, and then you multiply it by the number of words in the reference word count, and then that shows you kind of a standard measure of how many errors you got relative to other documents that you translated. The penalty scaler is used there, and again, I'll explain in a minute. This score goes from 0 up. 0 is the best. If you get no penalty points, that's because there were no errors. That's good. So 0 is the best score you can get. The other one kind of inverts it a little bit, and that's like the quality scores we normally are used to seeing, that something is perfect, it gets 100. If it's pretty close, it's 98 or 99 and so forth, right? And so that's going to be working down from 100 And the penalty scalar, once again, is in both of those. The maximum value for the quality score is the maximum score value. The idea there is that you could run your quality score from 0 to 100 or 0 to 5 or 0 to 20, whatever is meaningful to you. Back in 1.0, it was hard-coded at 100. But if you're used to a country where the grading system, for example, goes to 5, maybe you'd like to know if it's a 3.8 or a 4.6, right? Maybe that's more meaningful to you, and you can make your maximum score value 5 in that case. You know what? I think this is a good place to show you the... Oops, I got to keep doing that, don't I? Here we go. So this is, and I have to close that every time I see that. All right, so this is a spreadsheet. And I just messed up the display. Oh, stop. I don't know why I keep. Okay, let me go to the top of this right here. There's a better way to get to the top. That's to go down. All right, so here you see in this particular spreadsheet, all the blue values came out of the error annotation, error compilation. Those are hard values that came from this exercise. The kind of orangey color is the parameters that are used to calculate the scores, and the yellow ones are the calculated values at various places. So to take, I'm not going to make you look at formulas for anything, but I'll just tell you that if you look at this line right here where it says accuracy, well, let's go down one. We have some things. If you look at mistranslation, there's 1 neutral, 5 minor, 2 major, and 1 critical. Again, if you look up at the line on top, you will find that if you multiply that severity penalty of 0 times the 1, and then 1 times the mistranslation of 5 of those, and 2 of the majors, and those are worth 5 each, so we're at 15 points, and then 125, should be at 40. Yes, the answer is 40. So you multiply all those things together, and you come up with the total number of penalty points for that error type. You do that for each of the error types, and then you tally that at the bottom. Oh, I don't want to use this version, sorry. I got some extra lines we don't really need. You tally that at the bottom, and there's a total for the whole thing. You divide it by the number of let me do this. If you want to follow along in the formula bar, you can. You divide it by the number of words in the document, and then you norm it. You multiply it by 2 things. You multiply it by the reference word count and the penalty scalar. And again, I'll show you what the penalty scalar. I'll show you right now why we would want a penalty scalar. And then you take that and you can turn that into a quality score. So we're getting a penalty scalar here of 28.77 and a quality score of 97.12. And oh, by the way, the first word in each case is overall. The reason that's there is because we want to do the same thing with individual error types. So this is for the whole text, whereas you might want to drill down for error types. Okay, so why would we want to do this? If you look at this, you'll see that our overall norm penalty total was 28.77. Can anybody here tell me what you think we would get if we changed the severity penalties from 0, 1, 5, 25 to 0, 10, 20, 50? Can you guess? It's going to be twice as much, right? Every single one of those numbers is going to be multiplied by 2. And I don't know if I have to show you that. What's more interesting is if we do it with something a little bit different. Suppose we did in the 1.0, the default values were 1, 10, and 100. It was 27, 28, right? Now we're at 60 because we changed those values, right? Or 135 would give you smaller values, okay? And the same thing, the overall quality score went down because we multiplied everything. That is kind of a hidden penalty scalar. Why should you think that if you choose 135 or 110, 100, that they're going to come up with perfect numbers? They're just numbers. How do you know they correspond to what people think of as good quality or bad quality? There's a way that I'm going to show you to get them to do just that. All right, so that's one of the reasons is that these scales, and if you work for an LSP, you'll find customers that use all kinds of different scales, and their values are all over the map, and you need some way to bring them all together. Okay, let's call that good. All right, explain these 2 things. Yeah, reference quality scores. I've actually explained that. Let's go on. So here's an interpretation that you might want to give. This one was adapted from a grading scale that is used by the European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System. There are different kinds of grading scales in every country in Europe and the world. And if you're looking to apply to a job or apply to university, what does that score mean? I graduated from a high school where the top grade was a 1 and the bottom score was a 4. That's the exact opposite of the way most universities work. So when I told people I got a 1.1 as my GPA, they thought I was really stupid. And that was just because we were working on a different scale, right? So so this is a way to get everything onto the same page, apples to apples. And the descriptions that are there, these are adapted from the descriptions of what a particular grade should represent. So in the ECTS system, these descriptions talk about a mastery of a subject, right? Here we're talking about the quality of a translation. So there's a couple of little tweaks that had to be made. And then those numbers, 90 to 100, 80 to 89, come from the numeric values that are given to these grades in various countries of the world, including the United States. So this gives you a way of correlating a number with an expected quality range. And I think that most of you will agree that those numbers and those descriptions kind of sync up. If it's 90 to 100, it's outstanding quality without any significant errors. If it's 80 to 89, it's above average quality, but it has some minor errors. 70, 79 is generally sound quality, but with some errors and so forth. You go down to the bottom, they have an E. We don't have that in America, but they have an E. Quality barely meets the minimum level, and F is it needs requirement to even reach the minimum level. So those seem like reasonable descriptions. So how do you get the numbers we generate into those ranges? And the answer is the penalty scalar. This is going to be a homework assignment for all of you once you get started on IMUG 2.0, coming up with a good penalty scalar. I'll say something about that. But I'm of the opinion that the scores that we're using in most evaluations today are way too small. We need to multiply them all by some number between 2 and 5. And so what you're thinking of as a 98 probably is a 90. What you were thinking of as a 90 is probably a 70, right? You know, the scores we're reporting are way too good. That's my opinion. But there's a way to actually test that hypothesis. All right, the quality review is the final step. And the idea there is that you go through, after the quality analysis gives you hard numbers. It's like saying this person is 1.7 meters tall, right? That's a number. What you do with that number is the quality review. So if you're running the roller coaster and you say you must be this tall to ride on the roller coaster, oh, that's the application. You got to be 3.5 feet or whatever it is to ride the roller coaster. But you can measure that in meters or inches or whatever you want, but you still got to be this height to get on the roller coaster. This is what the quality review does. It's okay, you generated your numbers. What does it mean for us in our context? So here is just an example, and you can invent any example that you want. This is all up to the end user. So let's say that one of the important things is you want to categorize everything as pass or fail, right? So you have, so here's how you decide if something is pass or fail. It's a two-part question. One, is the number of critical errors equal 0? If it has even one critical error, it's not going to pass. So if it got 0 critical errors and the overall quality score is greater than 70, or alternatively, the overall norm penalty total is less than 300, those are more or less equivalent. If it meets both of those criteria, it's generally good enough and there's no critical errors, then it passes. But if it fails either one of those criteria, then it fails. Now, that's a reasonable explanation of what a pass-fail would mean. So you can come up with your own examples. That's just one. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to my my magic. Oops, that goes fast, doesn't it? So I mentioned that getting the right penalty scalar is critical to coming up with the right quality scores and the right overall norm penalty total. But how on earth do you do that? How can you say that this penalty scalar is right and that penalty scalar is wrong? There's a way. And this cycles back to, remember when I talked about the holistic quality evaluation? Where people go through and they do a high-level evaluation and say, well, I think this is a 90, I think this is an 85. It's coarse-grained, right? But it's overall a measure of the overall quality of that translation. You can turn that number, whatever, even if it's a 0 to 10 scale or a 0, whatever, you can turn that into a number on the 0 to 100 scale that I just showed you. So you turn a holistic score or some other quantitative score that you believe in into something that lines up with that 0 to 100 score that we showed you with the grades. So that's going to be kind of your target, right? And the target says this should be an 80, but on the overall quality score. But when we measured it, we got it as a 90. So if we had multiplied that by a factor of 2, the difference between 90 and 100 is 10. The difference between 80 and 100 is 20. That would have stretched it out and made that 90 into an 80. Well, how do we know that 2 is the right number? And one way to do that is to go through and line them up and say, well, what number would work? This is, by the way, this particular spreadsheet is not available today, but I will put it, I'm going to show you a website in a minute where you can get some of these things. This will be made available on that website at some point soon. I'm not going to say this week. In short weeks, it'll be made available there. So this particular website, this particular formula here says, oh my goodness, never mind. Says, okay, we did this analysis well, let me go up and show you the analysis. Suppose we did the analysis, the same analysis I've been using for everything. That's all fake data, by the way. I was just putting numbers there to generate something. So let's say that you did that analysis and you used the standard reference word count of 1,000, maximum score value of 100, and for the moment we're using a penalty scalar of 1, right? And so you come up with some scores. You come up with an overall penalty total and an overall quality score. So we get the 28.7 and the 97.1. Okay, that's what we got in our results. Now let's go back and say, well, what did we get when we did the same analysis using our holistic quality score? And there's formulas in here. I won't bother you with those. But using the same data points, let's say, or input points, let's say that we determined independently that evaluation that we did should have been an 80. And we ended up being like a 97 or something. We were way off. So if you plug in 80 here, let's just for fun, just so this can, somebody shout out a number between 50 and 100. What was it? 75. All right. Suppose that based on our holistic quality score, we believe that this really should have been a 75, right? So let's go in and put in 75. And what you'll see is that we generated a new, this TPS is the target penalty scalar, not the one we used, but the one maybe we're trying to generate. We generated a new one of 8.69, okay? I'm going to do a copy and paste with that. I'm going to go back up to, there's one where you can change alternatives. Let's go back up and change this guy right here. I don't have a mouse, so I'm a little slow. Okay, do you see that 8.69 there? Go dink, 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 dink. Look what the overall quality score is. It's 75. Okay, so you can work backwards from the quality score you want to come up with a penalty scalar that would have given you that. Okay, final step. Let's say you do that a whole bunch of times. You can take those and average them. And so this last little part of the spreadsheet that I'm going to show you is, it's a weighted average. Everybody knows how to do weighted average. You go through and you make a line for every evaluation you did. You give some kind of a label to the evaluation. You go through and you say, well, when we did this reconciliation with a holistic quality score, we came up with a penalty scalar was 5.37 or 3.96. And as a weighting factor, you use the number of words that were in that document, the evaluation word count. Forget the stuff on the right. But you end up with a total there, and you come on down and you divide it by the sum of the weights, and lo and behold, you say that for this set of 50 documents, probably a 3.62 would get us into the right range. So instead of 1, 3.62. So you decide that you're going to make 3.5 or 3.6 to be your default penalty scalar. And now you can expect, you can also go back and reapply it to the old evaluations, right? Regenerate the quality scores. So now you get some quality scores that you believe are going to line up with realistic expectations of quality. Instead, if you did imagine 3.6 versus 1, everything's going to be almost 20, almost a fourth of what it should be, that spread should be. So anyway, that's the idea there, is there's a process that you can go through. That's the last thing I'm going to show you. With that, I'll go to my last slide. You actually have a role to play, or make quality evaluation great again. It's my motto. If you go to, I've made a bit.ly URL, Tenney IMUG, and you have to know how to spell Tenney. That's E-Y, not Y. If you can manage that, you're okay. Then there are three organizations, there are three places that are kind of tracking the work that we're doing. This is an ASTM standard, and so ASTM is obviously one of the places. Just so you know, it costs $75 a year to join as a member of ASTM, but then you get voting privileges and commenting privileges and so forth. And you can comment on other draft standards as well. So that's ASTM, and also ASTM only releases ASTM materials to people who buy it. And there are certain things that we want to have available to a whole bunch of people. So we're putting them other places, and we're drawing from them, making these other places the primary source for various things, and then we're drawing that into the ASTM standard. So we're trying to help people out. One of the best places we're doing this is we have a community group in W3C, and all you have to do is go there. You have to register in W3C. You have to do that much. But then you can go there and you can see all the materials that we're making available. And then there's a third site that Alan Melby has called Tranquility, and there's no membership, and he just puts stuff there, and you can go look at it. So if you go to this Tenney IMUG thing, you'll find a page on the Tranquility website that has two things there, and over time it'll have more things. Right now it has two things. One of them is it has a pointer to a 2-page document that tells you how to sign up on ASTM, where to go, how you do the different kinds of things you want to do on ASTM. So how do you get on and use this by way of ASTM? There's another little bit of documentation saying here's where you go on the W3C to find the same kind of material, and there's discussion groups there. And all the good stuff's going to be there, trust me. And then the final one is on Tranquility. So there's two items there. One of them is this pointer to this getting started document, and the other one is that we've just done a public version of the MQM scoring model. That it's got formulas and it's got all kinds of good stuff there. You can go through and read it. It's the first half tells you how it works, and the second half shows you what you can use it for and how you would use it. The kind of thing I just showed you with the penalty scaler, for example, that's all described in there. So you can go and look at that if you want to find out more about it. When you go to these sites, there's a couple of things you can do. There's a couple of things that are well on their way, but you can get involved in. So the error type modifications, we're actually changing some of the error types. So if you think there's something we missed and you really think it ought to be on there, then now's the time to speak up, because the door will close on that at some point. The root cause definition, even though I didn't show it to you, we do have an initial set of root causes, and also the same thing for the duplicate error conflation, the way that works. If you want to, I'm sure there'll be a discussion. We can do it this way or that way. And if you think it should be that way, and we're leaning towards this way, then we really need to hear what you have to say. There are some big things that have not been pushed very far. There's a thing called decision trees. Decision trees are a methodology for saying, hey, look, here's an error, but I can't tell if it's this kind of an error or that kind of an error. It could be interpreted as either one. That's a real issue. So a decision tree says, well, if it's this, then it's that, and if it's that, then it's the other one, and if it's this, then it's that, and if it's the other thing, then it's this third thing, right? So it shows you how to figure out what's what, right? Step by step. That's a decision tree. Root cause taxonomy that I didn't show you, sorry about that, but that's really, really green. So I'm Brent, I put the first version of it together this afternoon, drawn from some emails and different kinds of things. So that's got a lot of work to go until that's hammered into a good shape. So it's a good time to get, and I think hopefully you've gotten a sense of what the root causes are all about, so you can contribute to that discussion. And then then I made that one little comment at one point, the O in the overall norm penalty total means this is a measure for the whole document. And there's an ET, which is error type, norm penalty total, and error type, quality score. We haven't really elaborated how that's going to work. We want to do it. We have some ideas, but if you want to get involved in that conversation, you can too. So there's a couple of things that we're very early on, and a couple of things that you can also contribute to. So that's it. So if you go to the bit.ly, Tenney, IMUG, you can find everything you want, and at some point the slides will be up there as well. So with that, I thank you, and we can take questions, I think. Ken, I'll let you be the surrogate for all the people out there in internet land.
Okay, go ahead and type questions in the chat pod, people online, and anybody here who would like the microphone, please raise your hand. I'm sure the new people have lots of questions.
It's kind of a tradition that I always ask the first question, but I think that would not be appropriate tonight.
Merle also usually gets the last question and the last
First
word.
or the
How are we
last.
going to do that this time?
So I have a few questions, but the first one, as you were talking about, like working with different types of
Is that mic on?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're working with different types of like penalty scores and stuff, would like if I was running these within a tech company, would I be running a different type of score based upon the content that I'm getting back? I mean, in my mind, it makes sense that I would be categorizing things way differently, trying to find the quality of support content compared to marketing content. It seems you should always grade like much more harshly on those. Is that something that is taken into account, or something that we should just be doing on a macro level?
There's 3 ways that you can customize your metric, because we're talking about a different metric, to different kinds of text. There's probably more, but 3 that come to mind. Number 1 is you may choose a different set of error types. If you're looking at marketing content, this whole design thing was the layout, was the, if you're looking at user interface, does stuff get clipped? That's not an issue with documentation so much, So you're looking for different kinds of things. So the error types is number 1. Number 2 is the values that you assign to something like the severity level penalties, right? And number 3 is the penalty score. Back once again, I would suggest, you can do all 3. I would suggest that changing the severity penalties is the last thing you should do. The first thing you should do is make sure that you're looking for the right kinds of error types. And the second thing you should do, and I think you should do this quite actively, is so you're working at a company where you're doing, say you have 2 groups. You have the tech group and you have the Marcom group, right? And they're looking for different stuff. They have different kinds of materials to translate. Their terminology is different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That thing I showed you where you had the 50 last times you did this and how you figured out that the penalty scalar was going to be, and then you averaged that and you came up with a new default. I would do that for 2 completely separate lists. And most people, okay, typical, if there is such a thing, company translates from English to other languages. You will find that some issues are more, they occur a lot more often, or they're more critical in another language. And if you get your style wrong in Japan, don't even release it, right? So some errors may be more significant than others. And so that's another dimension, is your target language. Probably not so much the source language, but definitely the target language. And so you might look at this target language, that target language, this text type, that text type, and then come up with some values that seem to work for that. But I'm not real crazy about changing the penalty severity penalties. First of all, it doesn't make that much difference. If you customize the penalty scalar, you can capture what you need. It's going to be good enough. Do you have another question? There's a question over here, and come back.
Hi, Merle. Thank you very much for presentation. So just when you talk about holistic kind of looking at this errors and also the translation errors and quality. So just wondering, have you ever thought about for different language pairs, say if you translate from English to Chinese, I mean the score, because there are so many sources, so the score can definitely higher compared to the languages if you translate from English to Tamil. Since there are not many resources in the market, and maybe you don't have many translators, to work on the content. So have you thought about their score gonna be different? And when you encounter this kind of issues, so is there any other things to, or just within the company, they may say, okay, so for certain languages, we're gonna have lower score because lower score gonna satisfy whatever we need. But then for certain languages, since we have so many resources, we can expect to a higher score.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that the approach is you start from the end and you work your way back. So the end in this case is that I would like it to be the case, and I think you would probably like it to be the case, that a quality score of 85 on a Chinese translation means about the same thing as a quality score of an 85 on a Spanish translation or translation from Chinese and English. 85 means something. To get to 85, you're going to definitely involve the penalty scalar. It may be that everything is too high or too low. I'll give you an example. I use the example of saying that I think that we're probably, when we actually get real numbers for penalty scalars, it's going to be something between 2 and 5. There's an example where you actually have something less than 1. What if you're looking at machine translation in some kind of a bot environment or whatever, and it's good enough, and it's coming up with quality scores of 90, and you think it should be 95? Okay, you're going to have a penalty scalar of 1/2, right? So you can improve the quality score. Generally, I think you want to lower it with these penalty scalars, but definitely you go through that kind of an exercise and you set your targets, and then it's really straightforward. I mean, we put the formulas are in that quality score document that I told you could go see, and they're also in the spreadsheet, right? So you just plug them in and see what you get, and then you put them into your average. And that would really be an interesting thing to do, I think, you know. So I don't know if that's me or somebody else. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's my stupid phone. That's what it is. Sorry, Terry, not right now. Yeah, any other questions on that?
No, actually, so because we did the project on that, so when we analysis all the qualities of the translation, we encounter this problem. Because for several languages, they actually, don't have many like resources, so their score certainly will go down compared to the languages it has more resources. So I think it's really good.
But you shouldn't fudge. Just you should not say, well, we don't have very many resources and the translations are going to be lower, therefore we'll make them sound better than they are. No, be honest. Be honest. And I've sometimes said, and I'll say it now, that there's 2 reasons why you might report scores that are artificially high. One of them is a lack of understanding of how to measure these things, and the other one is a lack of integrity, right? When you tell your boss, we got a 98, he says, way to go. Last year it was an 82, and he says, way to go, you're great. But then if he hears from the field, your translations are horrible, and you reported that it was a 98, that's really not a good long-term strategy. In general, being honest is a good life philosophy, right? But here, at least we give you the tools where you can figure out what it ought to be, and then you should just tell the truth. Say, we looked, it's not that great, but we've identified, this is actionable, we've identified the source, and we're going to put a lot of effort, and our goal is to get it from 80 to 88 in the next quarter and get into the low 90s the quarter after that. And then you have a conversation that's worth having.
Hi, I just have some feedback. We implemented the FQ and the framework in our tool.
You point that at your mouth.
Hello, can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, so I had some feedback. We implemented the framework from Taos and DFQ in our tooling, and a few things sort of came to mind. One was the primary framework is designed around text translations, but it was interesting. Customers want to use do transcription and other forms. So you could use the same framework with some adjustments for the same thing. So instead of using different kinds of error codes, but the same sort of framework. So that would be an interesting direction to do, to not have 2 different ways of looking at it, but having a single framework that supports different types of formats.
Yeah, you could say that this is a translation quality framework, or you could say this is a linguistic quality framework, or this is a quality framework, right? And anything that can be done using this methodology, use it. You may have different error types and different, severity penalties and all this kind of a thing. You may have some different things, but the framework should work. And especially if it involves that annotation piece. If you're going through finding problems and reporting them one way or another, then the rest of the model should just work fine.
The other feedback was, the framework we used in 2 ways. One was for translation in terms of looking at the quality of a translator. The other one was from a view of the end user, right? In terms of then they're reviewing the content and giving feedback.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the translator, you can apply the different error codes, right, in terms of when you're looking at this. But from a reviewer's perspective, anything over 10 or 15 error codes was like way over the head in terms of usability.
Yeah. So you got to be sensitized. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to, again, start at the end and work your way back. The end is the user. Now, the users are good and users are bad. Users are good because they're the consumers. They're the ones that know what they want. So that part is good. What the bad part is that they're not typically bilingual, and if they are, they're not looking at the source. So they just see the translation. If you have a beautiful, if you drop the word not on out of dosages should not be over 200 milligrams, it's going to look beautiful to them, right? And they're not going to see the problem. Their translator hopefully would see that problem. So I think the best person for the evaluator role is the same kind of a person you'd use as, say, a reviser, a very senior translator who can spot the errors, who's good at the target language, work in their own language, those kinds of things. So and sensitive to what the users are looking for. And if it turns out, we made things like the severity penalties and the error type weights parameters for a reason, so that you could change them, right? Now, just because DQF says 1525 or 1510 or whatever, that we didn't get that on stone tablets on Mount Sinai. That was something we worked out together. And even if that were good, generally speaking, it may not be good for you. So you have every right to go through and adjust it to what seems to work for your users and your text types.
So another comment was we also found that different kinds of reviewers or people reviewing the content have different quality criteria. So weighting the person reviewing is also another weightage into this model. Right?
Absolutely. So we have this. You might productively look at the penalty scaler as being the product of several factors. Like, this guy is way too easy. We need to weight his stuff more. Pretend like he found more errors than he did. This guy's way too harsh. We need to weight it less. You might look at other kinds of factors. In fact, I showed you that the one example I was kind of demonstrating the need for the penalty scaler. I said, what if you change the penalty values, and it has a huge impact on the overall norm penalty total and the overall quality score. It has a huge impact, like 3 to 1. So if you're gonna use something other than the 1525, which you're welcome to do, have some sense of what the different overall score would be. What I happened across a slide that I didn't want to show you, so now it's probably a good time to show you that slide. This is the slide I showed you where you got the numbers at the bottom. The next slide, which is a variation of that, shows, you see those extra lines in there? There are things like the average number of, what did we have? The average number of penalties per error. For every single error, how many points ended up being added for that error. And if you change some of those things, that's going to get you a different number. And if you know that if you're using 135 instead of 1525 or something, that the ratio is going to be 2.5 to 1, well, you can factor it in. There's ways of dealing with that.
The other thing was interesting to see the reference word count. What we found is the more words there are to review, the quality of the review goes down.
Really?
Because people, as they get through page 5, 6, 7, they get tired, they get lazy. So
the quality of the review, not the quality of the score.
Correct.
So they're probably flagging less and making it look like it's better than it is.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. There's another factor that you might want to be aware of. If you have an overall total of 42 error types like DQF does, right? Then you can expect to have a certain number of errors being flagged. But you say, that's way too many. We can not handle more than 10. So all of a sudden, those end up being subtypes that aren't flagged individually, but they should, in theory, be flagged at a higher level. You're not going to flag as many things if you just have the higher level error. If you have the lower level error, people are going to recognize more stuff. So yeah, those are. This got a lot of potential problems, but this is how you get started. Then, as a quality manager, you can go in, you can train your people, you can find out the maximum number of hours per day. You can do quality reviews. You start figuring out how to do it well. But this at least lets you get onto the playing field. And even if you're really scrupulous about it, you're going to have difficulties getting started. But over time, I think this can really be good. We talk about, I should have started with this, but we always talk about time, cost, and quality. Time and cost are relatively easy to measure. Quality is hard to measure. This is a way to measure quality, and it's critically important. If you find you're spending an inordinate amount of time to go from an 85 to an 88, you triple the amount of expense, twice as much time, don't do it, right? And how would you know that you were not getting that much of a payback? Well, you have a quality score. So you actually go in and measure it. And I've done that a number of years ago. I did it working at BMC, and we were evaluating, the main thing we were evaluating is different translation modalities. What happens if you have a human translator do it versus have a machine translation versus having a post-edited machine translation? I'll bet you can guess what we found. That the machine translation failed miserably. We were getting scores around 50, right? Especially in languages like German. It was just awful. We weren't getting as much savings as we thought we would get by post-editing machine translation, but we did get savings. We saved about 15%, which is well worth doing, right? The quality level between post-edited machine translation and human translation, the post-edited was just a little bit better than the human at 85% of the cost and half the time, right? So this gives you actionable information for that particular kind of text, right? This gives you information that you can use for making intelligent decisions. But you've got to put all that together and factor it in.
Anybody else?
I think that's a sign that we've had enough.
That's a sign that that was a lot of information.
Yeah, go to the site, and we'll be adding more stuff over time. And get involved. That's the main thing. Is start playing with this.
Thank
It'll make
you.
a difference.